Indiana's 25th district knows what reinvention feels like. In Anderson, the echoes of manufacturing still linger, but so does resilience. In Alexandria and Atlanta, small town life moves steadily, rooted in family and tradition. In Pendleton, growth meets heritage, new neighborhoods rising near long standing community landmarks. District 25 carries history, union halls, factory floors, local pride. But today, families are asking, are good paying jobs coming back? Is healthcare within reach? Are schools preparing kids for something bigger than survival? This district doesn't need rhetoric, it needs results. Our guest tonight is Todd Shelton, a Democratic candidate for Indiana State Senate District 25, serving communities including Anderson, Alexandria, Pendleton, and Atlanta. District 25 is a district that knows what industrial transition feels like. It knows what happens when plants close, when jobs move overseas, when working families are left asking, what comes next? Todd Shelton doesn't talk about that as an outsider. He lived it.
Yep.
He worked at Magnequich, General Motors, as a production worker, served as a union committeeman and bargaining committee member, and experienced firsthand what it meant when his plant shut down and jobs were sent overseas. He later served in the U.S. military, and after being injured, was honorably medically discharged. Today, he is a disabled veteran who understands the real cost of service, not just in policy debates, but in personal terms. Using the GI Bill, Todd earned both undergrad and master degrees and has spent more than a decade teaching technology at IUND. He also runs a small family business serving Indiana communities. He's not running to build a political resume. He says he's running because working Hoosiers, veterans, teachers, factory workers, small business owners deserve someone who actually stands in their shoes. Tonight, we're going to test that. Todd Shelton, welcome to Oldham County.
Thank you, Derek. It's nice to be here, and I look forward to this because I am that working man, and I'm here to, bring District 25 back where it should be.
From one disabled vet to another, thank you for your service.
Thank you, and same to you. Yeah.
Anderson's economy has shifted dramatically over the decades. What's your concrete plan to strengthen local job growth?
Yeah, that's a good one. We could probably take up the entire time with just my experience with Anderson, right? So, as you mentioned in the intro, I did work for General Motors in Anderson, and I experienced that when it left. And you're right, when a company leaves, it took all the, all the business out of Anderson and all those supporting businesses. So what I would like to do is, expand the employers that are already there, which we have quite a few. They brought back a lot of manufacturing. They brought some in there, and I also want to make sure that we are training the people in our community for jobs that pay more. I feel like sometimes that we don't do a very good job of letting individuals know that there's support out there where they can get training and get a good paying job, and they just settle for whatever is in their community, right? So that's the second part. And the third one is I want to make it easier to grow small businesses. Now, I own a very small business. I do a lot of freeze-dried food and do things like that. And over the course of the last couple of years, cost of living, people don't want to buy that small stuff, so it's been hard as a small business. And I want to make sure that a small business can succeed, whether that's through funding or making sure that we can fast track different permits so they can get out there for those farmer market things or anything else that they need to do. Now, I do want to mention a couple of things while we're in there is like Anderson does have pretty large employers, especially in the healthcare. We have Community Hospital. We have Ascension Health, which is there. Used to be old St. John's for Anderson. We have Nestle, and Hoosier Park are there. So there's some pretty good jobs in there. But those we need more because our community is bigger, right? We need to have that up there. And for me, I'm probably going to touch base on a little things that might trigger some people. And this is technology growth, and what does that mean? So I teach technology, and one of those technology fields is AI, right? And a lot of, my party or Democratic Party don't like that for a lot of reasons. Um, I don't like the environmental impact it has. I agree with all of that. However, in the industry I have to accept some of that, right? Or my students don't get jobs in the field that they're trying to get jobs in. So I've got to accept those roles. And where I'm going with that is the fact that with that, we can try to bring these high-tech advanced manufacturing plants into our community, into Anderson. I notice I said manufacturing plants. I know data centers are out there. I'm not talking that. To me, yeah, is it a job? But they don't bring that many jobs. Data centers use more utilities. You've probably heard this many times in these interviews, but they don't bring a lot of jobs with them, right? So me, I would like to focus on that advanced manufacturing and use state initiatives like the next level jobs initiatives that can, which gives people $5,000 of tuition to get a certificate. And I actually was using that for a while. So, like you mentioned, I work at Indiana University of Indianapolis, and I created a boot camp style full stack, which is a web development thing. I created a certificate so individuals could use that grant to go get jobs. And until all the budget cuts happened with all the public universities and everything, and we lost our recruiter and we lost all of that, we were taking those to the people that was just released from correctional institutions, that could get jobs in good paying jobs in industries that need it, right? So my three goals, I guess, in that thing was, make sure that we can expand what's already there. And for Anderson, it might be for maybe a tech area for industrial parks and things like that. Yeah.
Madison County has struggled with healthcare access and affordability. What state level reform would you push first?
Yeah, those are good. And you're right. So, healthcare access is, that's a hot topic everywhere in our state, I think, right? I'm going to tell you, whether it's access as far as just driving to a facility or whether it's access to me getting good healthcare in a reasonable amount of time. As a veteran, I'm not sure if you experience this, at the VA, it takes me 4 months to get in to an appointment, which that should never happen with our healthcare. And with my private doctor on the outside, it's the same thing. And I'm just thinking, okay, I can understand if the VA was not funded well and we don't have those, but in the private sector, that should never be a thing. And that's one of the reasons I'm running. This has to stop. There's people out there with mental health issues, with any kind of other health issues that cannot get the health treatment they need. So what would I do? Okay, so that takes us back to several things. In my community in Madison County, which I say Madison County because that's the largest part of my district. I just want, if anybody's watching this, I know I have the top part of Hamilton County, so Atlanta and Arcadia is up there. So I would make access to them too because they are just as rural as what most of Madison County is, right? So I want to make sure I specify that. But I would end up doing like maybe if we can get some clinicians to move into those areas, to set up, little buildings or little offices so people can have access to those, maybe do a some sort of funding or grant that would pay back their loans to help them relocate and to give them initiative to move into those small communities, right? We need that. Not to mention, I would definitely push a policy and support, like there's a one called growth, which is growing rural opportunities and well-being. I would definitely use those kind of initiatives to focus on this rural health, right? And I think we've probably all, know some of this, but like in 5 years, Indiana, had 206.9 million in family and social services stuff. to run healthcare access. And I want to increase that if we need it. I really do, you know? So those are some of the things that I would do to have healthcare more accessible in our rural areas, and try to stimulate that in those rural county or rural cities and towns.
Talking about small towns, Alexandria and Atlanta often feel overlooked. How would you ensure they receive equal attention?
Yeah. And they probably do. I got to be honest with you. They're little. I grew up in Madison County, so I traveled in all these cities all the time when I was little. You know, I grew up closer to Alexandria, and that was a great little town growing up. And you know, I go up there now, and it's amazing how it's changed. You know, how things are not there anymore. You know, same way moving up to Elwood and we go to Arcadia, which is Arcadia. If you go up there a little bit, they're starting to progress. They're starting to move some neighborhoods up in there. But what I would probably do in these cities is focus on like a Main Street first kind of initiative, right? Using regional grants and things to bring that stimulation to that town back in there, make people want to stay in that town and not just be, what do they call them, a bit like a bedroom town where people just come back there to sleep and that's all they're doing, right? I want growth in each city. So, you know, if you look at Anderson, what happened there, like this has been, you know, 20 years ago, probably when they revitalized downtown, and they could have done a better job with that. However, that did bring a lot of extra businesses in there, you know, but I think all small towns could do that. And I would try to make an initiative to do that, and to make those small towns a little bit better, which I think would help, is to increase the broadband and the infrastructure that comes in there. I hate to say it. So I live right outside of a small town, right next to the middle school, and lived here for years and years. And I just got high speed internet like 6 months ago. And I'm thinking, I live right next to this school. I cannot get internet? That's crazy to me. So I want to make sure that people have, you know how to put in, you know, so they can try to get infrastructure. I think I'm going to talk about this later probably, but and make sure that they're getting the infrastructure they need in those communities. But Main Street focus would be kind of a stimulation.
Workforce retraining is a critical in post manufacturing communities. What investment comes first?
Hmm. Yeah. You know what? So, you know, I teach, I'm a senior lecturer. So I do a lot of degree programs. So an undergrad, master's. A lot of times that does not suit the normal working person, right? In general, it doesn't. So I think what comes first is we need to make sure that we have a good paid pathway, right? For apprenticeships, for short credentials like that certificate I was talking about. Because if you are a working adult, it's hard to go back to school for a long period of time to get that degree, which, you know, I've always said this a lot of times anymore, that degree doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get you that good paying job, right? However, we do have, you know, a lot of skilled trades and trades that need help. And I would love to partner with these unions or these companies and fast track that process to where we can say, hey, this person is going to get the fundings they need to get this apprenticeship, and we want to know that they can get that job when they finish that. Whatever that is, whether it's coming out of high school and they do a trade in there, or if it's, you know, taking the apprenticeship at night. But we have several unions around, just like the operating engineers and the electrical workers. And we have all of those that they struggle to find some people sometimes, you know? So, and those are good paying jobs, really good paying jobs. And I am full support of those. Um, you know, like you mentioned, I was a UAW member. I worked for GM. You cannot imagine how many people just wanted to get a skilled trade job back then when we worked for GM. It was like, oh, yeah, that's the best thing ever. And it was so hard to get into those programs. And now they are hurting and can't find people to get in there. And I want to make sure that people can and have the funds available to do that.
Public education funding remains a hot topic statewide. How would you support schools in District 25?
Oh, you just hit a hot topic with me, Derek. That's going to be a tough one. I'll try to keep it short though, because, you know, I teach, so I'm very passionate about this. Is one of the things I'm passionate about. Um, So what I would end up doing is making sure that the public schools keep the funding that they need, right? That's how I would support, because when people outside of the community, when they're looking for homes in a community, one of the first things, especially if it's a family, is what's the school system like? And that's the first thing. If you have kids, what you say, they don't go, oh, what charter schools there, what private schools there. They're like, what's the public school system like, right? And Anderson, unfortunately, has declined in that area. Where I live, that was the one of the first thing that I looked for. And luckily, when my ex-wife had lived in another town, we were able to compare those schools. But we both looked at that school system. So a few things I would do is make sure that we keep the funding in those public schools. And I don't know, like, I'm learning a lot in this area of charter schools, public schools. I'm sure a lot, and a lot of people don't know this, but the state funding for a student, if a student leaves a public school, that money follows the student to go to a charter school. But it's really not fair, because the public school still has to pay for that infrastructure. It still has to pay for the transportation that they are required to supply, right? And everything else that goes into that, where a lot of the other schools that people go to, they do not have that, you know, um, overhead. So to me, I want to make sure that that funding, if a student goes to a charter school, which, by the way, I like the fact that people have options, I like that, but I want to make sure that funding would stay in that public school, so that public school system can continue to grow. And I think this has probably been mentioned a lot of times through people, but I want to make sure that our teachers get the pay that they deserve. I would like to see the minimum pay for a teacher, the minimum start off at 65,000. I mean, the research that I've done, we're looking at an average right now of like 58, somewhere around in there, but this needs to increase. I teach at higher level, and I know what I face every day with students. And not saying students are bad. I'm just saying it is a lot of pressure to deal with so many personalities in a room. And my students have already went through that puberty, you know what I mean? Went through a lot of the hormone changes. I totally respect K through 12 because they deal with a lot of things. And I think that our support, as far as state should funding and supporting of schools, should go into mental health, not only for our students, but also for our teachers. A lot of them just need to talk to people. And the reason why I say that is because if you just go back, I talked to the teachers union a month and a half ago, and I went back and just looked at the bills that passed since 2021. And I was astonished at what they are doing. And, like they've restricted how teachers talk about race, sex, and history in our classrooms, which, okay, some of that may be, a hot topic with some people, but people still need to be taught history. We should not stop people from learning what really happened in different areas, right? And most of that's K through 12. We've added more parental control over curriculum and things like that. And I'm not saying that a parent shouldn't have some sort of say in, the curriculum a little bit, but it needs to be done at the school board and not pushed down from the state house, pushing down these policies, because they don't know. These teachers are trained to teach. They go to school to teach, and they need to be able to teach. And when you have bills that allow, and I'm going to cut this part short, I could probably go the other bills, but when you have bills that allow a fast track complaint system, and when you have political oversight over what a teacher is teaching, that hinders all of our education. And for me, part of that support is not only funding, it is also making sure that our teachers can teach, the kids and our youth, because that youth is pretty much going to take care of us, hopefully, when they in just several years. And I want to make sure that they're ready for it.
Infrastructure and broadband access remain uneven. Which projects would you prioritize?
Yeah. That I would almost combine them. I mean, it's hard to differentiate between one or another, and I agree, infrastructure in general, when you think about if you just think about utilities, there's a lot of places that only have electricity, and I mean, the phone lines that are running out in some of these rural areas have been cut, whether it's been through farming accidentally or, just construction in general. It's ruining everything, and if it wasn't for cellular networks, you know, um, it would be it would just hinder everything, communication in general. However, people don't think about a lot of the ways that these rural communities were getting internet or broadband was from DSL, and DSL was from telephone lines. And if you cut all that, then you're still cutting off that access. So to me, I kind of combine the infrastructure and broadband, and I want to I don't know, use programs like BEAD, which is the broadband equity and access development program. I want to use things like that and make sure the communities that need it get it, right? And all the infrastructure. Because in my personal experience, I teach, and I'm going to take us back a few years, but COVID was a good example. We all had to move online, and there was a lot of people that they couldn't work from home. We couldn't go out, and that changed the way a lot of people started looking at where they're going to live now. What happens if that happens again? Or I really need that access, and I would love to live on 20 acres somewhere, right? A lot of people would, but they don't have broadband there, so it's hard for me to teach if I was teaching online or anything like that to do my job. So I want to make sure that we prioritize the infrastructure, the build out, the all of that for all of these small communities, especially when you get up into past Alexandria and really into these rural areas because they don't see much of that growth.
The district has swung politically in recent cycles. What's your strategy to win both the primary and the general election?
Yeah, that's a good one too. So, I want to talk to everyone and I want to talk about like the kitchen table issues, right? I want to talk about the affordability, the healthcare, and I'm going to target all of that. And you're right. When I worked for GM and Anderson, the UAW was huge. And it just kind of came out of this where GM started selling off their plants, so the membership was dying down a little bit. But I remember when there was 17,000 union members just at one union hall, and we had two union halls, and it was definitely mostly Democratic in this time, right? During this time, and it has shifted over the years. But I think those people are out there. Those people are still there, and I'm going to win them over because I've lived the experience they have. I've worked it. I've lost my job. Part of my plant went to China and the other part went to Mexico. I know what that's like. And for a lot of people, they were devastated and they were fed up and they don't know what they had and they just switched. They thought they were going to the right person for the right fight to get what they need. And I think when they see that here's a person coming back to bring that back to them, that's what I'm going for. I want to show the citizens of Madison County that there's somebody that can take that working man's voice or the working person's voice back to the state house and get what we need. Yeah.
Small businesses anchor Pendleton and other communities. How would you support them without overburdening them?
Yeah, that's a good one. So, I mean, I would probably try to not probably, I would definitely try to make sure that we cut the red tape for everything. Whether that's permits, whether that's any kind of training they need, for certain things, making access to grants available, more state grants. I don't know how many times I looked for grants to support my company. I would have loved to have opened up a storefront somewhere, and I wish there was a grant to help me do that, but there was nothing. And even as a veteran, it is tough. Most of these veterans or programs, it's hard to get them. I would like to make that more accessible to local communities. Pendleton does very well. If anybody goes down that small town, they've done very well. They've got a small town, which is kind of what I want to do with these other small towns, that Main Street First kind of initiative, and have these small towns maybe give some rent, discount or ways to get businesses in there to set up. Because once they do, business will come, right? And community will start building. But you got to start off by helping these small businesses. Um, So that's what I want to do, and to help that. I also want to talk about like a talent pipeline, to make sure that we know where we can find marketing people, where we can find those type of deals. Because speaking from a small business, if you don't know how to market, you're not going to get anywhere. Right? It's tough to market and market your company. I mean, and there's companies out there that'll do that. And as a business owner, you don't have time if that's not your actual thing. You're busy making something and you need to find that talent that can do that for you and do it well to grow your business. And I want to make sure that pipeline's there so they can find that.
Mental health and addiction challenges affect many families here. What new policy approach is needed?
Yeah, mental health is huge. I see that all the time, and as a disabled vet, as a veteran, we see that a lot in veterans as well. And um we need to make sure that that is there for everybody. And that kind of goes back to that grow to make sure that we have the public health and the offices that we need in these rural areas so people can get that mental health, whether it's for addiction or anything, or just to talk to somebody. We need to know that they have access to that. Um, I want to increase the crisis response. I want to make sure that we can, get people if, in a crisis, we need to make sure that medical um personnel can get there on time, right? We need to know that they can not take a half hour to get somewhere or an hour to get somewhere, because most of the time that person is deceased by that time if it's that major. But I want to make sure we can kind of do that. Going back to that grow program that I was talking about earlier, we can do that in these rural communities and make sure that not only is it just health, but it's mental health. I think there is a difference. Like people just think, oh, I want health care, and they think they're going to go get a checkup or, stuff like that, x-rays. I'm talking about mental health counselors, therapists, people that they can talk to. That is, to me, part of that health access. And I want to make sure that we have that, whether it's telehealth, which again comes back to that infrastructure, right? So if we have broadband, telehealth works. It's there is if you can access it. Um, Shift toward like that crisis, stabilization centers, mobile crisis units, stuff like that. Um, that's kind of what I want to shift to for those. Yeah.
And finally, probably the most pressing question voters need to know: why you and why now?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it took me a long time to decide to run. Um, I've put up with a lot over the years, especially in education and losing my job when I worked for GM and things like that. The reason why I decided to become a committee member with the UAW was I was tired of watching, our factory workers get treated the way they were, right? And I'm not going to say it was the worst thing ever, right? But there was times, that I watched a girl get thrown out of the plant 3 times because she showed up late by the supervisor. Never asked any questions, just threw her out. And come to find out, her daughter was having seizures a lot and she couldn't get babysitters. And we do have FMLA, and they didn't have the right to throw that person out. And that was one of my first cases as a committeeman. And I love that case just for the fact that I was able to get her job back, and we made sure that supervisor never did that again. And there's more people out there like that, right? And I love helping people. And that takes me back to everything. I love helping people. And it's my time to make sure that we get the help we need instead of trying to tell everybody what they need, to try to rule everybody, right? Citizens don't need to be told what they want to live. They want to have that lifestyle, right? And as an educator, I want to make sure that we have access to good education, right? We need our youth, just like I mentioned earlier, we want them to have the proper education to get the good jobs, to open up a small business, to become that healthcare professional that we want them to be. And like I said earlier, I want to put that working voice back into the state house where it belongs. And I'm sure a lot of candidates say this. I've never been a career politician. Everybody, you know, I'm new to this. We talked about this a little bit. It's nerve-wracking to come into these interviews, to talk to people every day about bills that I've never even heard of, right? Because I don't live in that world, but I'm learning fast. And I will tell you one thing, I can learn them and I can write them and I'm educated and I will make sure that Madison County and District 25 gets the help they need if I get elected.
Oh, hi there. Do you live in Indiana? Are you watching this video? Come on in. I'm Blythe Potter. I'm running for Secretary of State. I'm a veteran, small business owner, a mom, and a lifelong Hoosier. I'm building a grassroots campaign focusing on talking to the people, not the establishment. So help me spread the message that Hoosiers deserve better from our elected officials. Oh, hey, before you go, introduce yourself in the comments and share this with a fellow Hoosier. Bye now.
We've talked about jobs,
Yep.
schools, healthcare, and the future of Madison County. Now is the time to narrow it down. No long explanations, no policy white papers.
Yeah.
This is hold 'em or fold 'em. Agree, you hold 'em. Disagree, you fold 'em. Quick and clear. Are you ready?
Yep.
Let's deal the cards.
All righty.
Healthcare should be treated as a human right with movement toward universal public coverage.
Hold 'em.
Indiana should raise the minimum wage and index it to inflation.
What was the one you said I could double down on?
Any that you want.
Yeah. Hold 'em on that. Yes.
Workers should have stronger legal protections to unionize without retaliation.
100% hold 'em.
Candidates should refuse corporate PAC or questionable special interest money, even if it costs them politically.
Hold 'em.
Indiana should invest more aggressively in renewable energy while creating jobs in industrial regions.
Hold 'em.
Public schools should be fully funded before expanding private voucher programs.
Yep. Hold 'em.
Universal background checks are necessary to improve gun safety.
Hold 'em.
Housing affordability requires expanded workforce housing and stronger tenant protections.
Yes. Hold 'em.
Mental health services deserve significant new state investment.
Hold 'em.
Elected officials must be willing to challenge their own party when constituents' needs come first.
Yes. Hold 'em.
Todd, District 25 has seen the full arc of the American story. Factory floors that once powered Anderson, union halls that organized working families, military service from sons and daughters who answered the call. Your story runs through all of that.
Yeah.
You've stood on a production line. You've sat at a bargaining table. You've worn the uniform. You've come home injured. You've used the GI Bill to rebuild and educate yourself. You've taught students preparing for their own futures. You've run a small business serving local communities. That's not theoretical experience. That's lived experience. Madison County doesn't need abstract speeches about working families. It needs someone who understands what happens when a plant closes, when healthcare bills stack up, when a veteran comes home changed. You've said you're not running to climb the political ladder. You're running to give working Hoosiers a voice again. Voters would decide whether that voice resonates. But tonight, you made your case. And to everyone watching and listening here in Indiana, across the country, and to our audience joining us from Europe, democracy works best when candidates bring more than opinions. When they bring lived experience. Because representation isn't about slogans. It's about whether someone has walked the road you are on. So stay informed, ask questions, and as always, hold them accountable.